What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of the Big Blue Banter podcast with myself and my co-host, Nick Turchin. We're here to bring you the latest in New York Giants football. As always, we're going to break down the All-22 film from the Giants' most recent game and then use that and other All-22 and everything we've kind of reviewed up until this point to preview the next game. We're also going to talk a little state of the Giants. Obviously, very, very, very disappointing first 6 games for the Giants at 1-5. The Giants came off arguably their worst loss of the season. I mean, it's pretty obviously their worst loss of the season against the Philadelphia Eagles at home. Game got away from them early, and they're just not a team right now that can come back when playing from behind. And it's really led to a lot of unpleasantries on Giants Twitter, not between myself and everyone, just in general. It seems like Giants Twitter really wants things to go black and white here. Either you're an Eli Manning apologist or you are an Eli Manning hater, it appears. And there seems to be nothing else going on with this 53-man football team other than the quarterback Eli Manning. And that, to me, is just really jumped the shark. I think that we need to be focusing on a lot of other things regarding this 53-man football team than just the quarterback, while at the same time recognizing that, quarterback play is the difference in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers' team, aside from a few players on that offensive line, maybe Devontae Adams, and maybe a few of the defensive players, that he does not have much talent on that Packers team. And he is a horrible coach, in my opinion, with a bad offensive scheme and Mike McCarthy. And yet that team's 3-2-1. The Giants have the best running back in football, arguably. I mean, let's not go that far, maybe, but one of the best, pretty much, considering how poor the Giants' offensive line has been in the run blocking department. And they're 1-5, and he's putting up record numbers. So, in the end, as I talked about before the draft, this is why the Giants had to take the quarterback when they had the chance. Hindsight's 20/20, maybe, or maybe we'll just wait and see what happens. But that's where I'm at right now. Nick, where are you at and how are you doing today?
I want to apologize in advance for my kind of cyborg-like emotion or lack of emotion to the Giants' poor play. I still love doing this, and for me, there's still a lot of good football to pick at. So although I may be harsh or whatever, it's really just because there's bad football. It's not because I love or hate anyone or, like you're saying, or want to compete in Twitter shouting matches for who's better or worse in some of these cases. It's pretty bad all around. But happy to be here.
Yeah, no doubt. We're still going to bring you everything we've brought you in the past. We're going to have more coming. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of Giants future talk going forward on this podcast, especially the week of the bye, where we'll kind of have a show that really looks to recap what we've seen so far through the first, 7 games it'll be at that point, or 8 games, I believe, at that point, and then kind of look into the future. And obviously, if any changes happen at the quarterback position with Eli Manning, we'll dive into that. But for now, we're going to dive into the All-22 review of the Giants' loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I want to start this one off by talking to Nick a little bit about the cloud coverages. We've seen that a lot on Giants Twitter this week. Cloud coverages used to stop Odell Beckham Jr. That was the Eagles' plan with their personnel going into the game at the cornerback and safety position. When you look at the next-gen route chart for Odell Beckham in that game, he really didn't run many vertical routes at all. He saw more snaps in the slot, but the Giants are not running him vertical routes out of the slot. So, what's going on with Odell Beckham Jr.? Are we going to blame this on Eli Manning? Are we going to blame this on Odell Beckham Jr.? We're going to give credit to the Eagles for some kind of novel strategies. And I'm not saying that's the case because we'll find out soon from Nick. Or are we going to just simply blame the play calling with Pat Shurmur? Where do you stand here, Nick?
I think it's going to push towards the execution on this front. They were playing to start the game off. They were playing a lot of single high, which what the Eagles would expect. But when Dan describes that cloud coverage, it's basically where the deep safety kind of rotates over to the lone X ISO side, or really wherever Odell Beckham was, and kind of, in layman's terms, double teams him. A very astute listener asked me on Twitter, what does that mean to the backside? The backside, it means there's usually going to be somebody open, to be kind of simplistic about it. So hitting the backside was kind of the key. That went way overboard in terms of what the Eagles were doing when Sidney Jones went down. He's their slot corner, very good slot corner. When he had to leave the game for injury, they really moved into a lot of cover 6 type structures with straight cover 2 and different variations on one side and a straight cover 4 on the other side. And, then that became to the point where it was pretty obvious what to do. There was kind of a little mystery in the post-snap world. And it wasn't executed is the bottom line. I think, there really wasn't a whole lot of other surprises besides that. The front played as expected. There were some unclean pockets. There were some whiffs on Fletcher Cox and all those types of things. But overall, there were definitely opportunities there that weren't hit on.
Yeah, I mean, going into this game, Nick, one of the things we talked about on the preview was the Eagles' personnel in the secondary. Now, in this game, we saw Rasul Douglas, who had been playing cornerback for them for the most part, have to shift over to safety. And that was something we talked about, the injuries for the Eagles at safety. What we talked about was the Giants stepping up and having an offensive game plan, a plan of attack that actually attacked the weaknesses of the opposing defense, something we wanted to see against New Orleans. We didn't see it. And really, throughout the entire season, I don't think we've seen it. Why, I think good coaches in the NFL attack the biggest weaknesses on the defense. I don't want to blame this on Pat Shurmur if you think that, part of this is Eli Manning not reading the defense right, not seeing, what's available. But I want to ask you, is this an issue that you think is some sort of a long-term issue for Shurmur as the play caller of the New York Giants, or, do you want to shoulder more of the blame on Eli?
I think at this point, if you had to evaluate the quarterback play, especially over the last 3 weeks, and if you're going from the vantage point of can the quarterback execute the plan as given based upon what the defense has provided, and then can he add value to that plan, which is kind of like the basis of almost how you'd want to scout a player. His grade would be very, very low. So Pat Shurmur is kind of coming over as advertised, with a simple complexity to his game and a lot of half field reads that are that are very simplistic for the quarterback. So it's pretty easy and straightforward. There's not a lot of complexity here. I think it has to go to Eli. I think it has to go to Eli and the lack of separation too. Again, showed this week. When the Eagles ran a lot of man. Teams are not afraid to run man coverage against the Giants, and so that has to be capitalized on. And there were throws that were missed for both the quarterback's fault and the wide receiver. So it's not to say the blame game is purely there, but the cold analysis is that there are opportunities here, and you could bring in another head coach and you could have another set of play calls. But guess what? You still have to deal with Tampa 2. You still have to deal with cover 3 cloud coverage, that type of thing.
I think you kind of sum up where I'm at this point as well, Nick. While I don't think it's black and white, and as black and white as Giants Twitter likes to seem to make it, it's not all on quarterback Eli Manning. But at the same time, he's not elevating the team with his level of play. He's not pretty much playing up to his $22.2 million salary cap hit. And when you do allocate $22.2 million of your limited salary cap to a quarterback or to any one position, especially the quarterback position, you need him to elevate that level of play. In general, in the NFL, winning franchises over the course of time, especially recently, recent NFL history, have developed a level of consistency with strong play at the quarterback position. I know there are anomalies. I know there are outliers. Denver Broncos with Peyton Manning in his final run. The Baltimore Ravens. There are teams that have kind of bucked this trend, but if you're not getting that level of play at the quarterback position, it's very hard to win in the NFL. And while I do want to put some of this blame not only on Eli Manning but Pat Shurmur, while Shurmur's scheme and what he's asking to do may be basic and cut and dry for the quarterback, I'm not sure that necessarily means it's the right plan of attack. I'm not sure that necessarily means it's what you want to see from an offensive scheme. And I'm just going to dive right into this real quick. I plan to get this a little bit later, Nick. Get to this a little bit later, Nick. But for me, I want to bring up to you something that I think has been flawed about the Giants' offense from the very start of the 2018 season. And I want you to kind of pick it apart and tell me why I'm wrong, or maybe why there's holes in this plan. For me, this offense from the very start of this season, knowing what we know now about Eli Manning, based on some of the signs we've seen from Eli Manning last season, and I know he had the injuries at receiver, and I know he had the poor offensive line play, and I know he had Ben McAdoo deal with. But based on what we've seen from the All-22 and everything like that, I think this offense should have run through Saquon Barkley from day one and every week. I think there should be no game that goes by without him getting 25 to 35 combined targets and rushing attempts per game. That could mean 10 targets and 20 carries, or that could mean 15 carries and 15 targets, something in that range. This offense is not running through Saquon Barkley. Now, if you run this offense through Saquon Barkley, you're going to get more diverse in your personnel. You're going to see more 21. And I know they have a new fullback in there who really hasn't played much fullback at the NFL level and just joined the team. I know that's not easy. I know they've had injuries at tight ends. They can't always use the 12 personnel. You got Scott Simonson and Garrett Dickerson as your number 1, number 2 tight ends like they had. Week 6 against the Eagles. But at the same time, I do believe that there are different ways to get Saquon Barkley the football on swing passes, on arrow routes, on vertical routes. We saw Kareem Hunt run a vertical route the other day against the Patriots. It was wide open against the cover. There are different ways to get Barkley the ball, but I think if this offense had committed to running through Saquon Barkley like the Cowboys do with Ezekiel Elliott, like the Jaguars do with Leonard Fournette when he's healthy, even though they don't utilize him that much in the passing game, something the Giants clearly can do with Barkley, I think it would have made things a lot easier for a quarterback like Manning at this stage of his career. I think it would have opened up more things for a wide receiver like Odell Beckham at this, within how the Giants are just in general. What do you think about that? And why couldn't the Giants simply have just run this offense through Saquon Barkley and let it open up via that?
I think that's a good question from the perspective that it doesn't have to be the running game. I did a massive deep dive for the red zone offense for Inside the Pile, and it just hit today. And I charted every red zone play. And for the red zone plays that go to Saquon Barkley that run on the rushing side of the house, there's 16 runs. 10 of those runs are inside zone or duo. His yards per carry is 1.9, and that includes a 15-yard rush. Their goal of being a multi-pronged run attack from the beginning part of the season is absolutely not there. And I don't think that's to blame coaches. I think it's to blame because they don't have the horses that can do it. So I think that takes the rushing side of the house and that gets him less rushes effectively. When we're talking about Barkley's production and how you're going to get him, like, quite frankly, I don't think giving Saquon Barkley the ball 20 times in this current state, and this is across the board. I think one of the other things I was thinking too is as I watched the tape again for this week is guys like Nate Solder, like he may end up being a right tackle for this team very soon. They're not getting any, they're not linking any, they're not a good offense on the rushing side of the ball. And so in terms of your point, which is right, that maybe getting him many, many more touches, I think in the red zone, and that was it's kind of one spoiler killer for my piece. That was kind of part of what I thought on the rushing game and the screen game. And believe it or not, the screen game in the far red zone can be very effective as well. But to back it up for the whole offense, I expected to see a few more arrow routes. You look at guys like Riddick in Detroit. You look at guys like Alvin Kamara. Those are guys that Barkley can play and you can mimic his type of thing, or his type of trait. So yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. Whether that opens up specifically things for the wide receivers, yes, and I mean it's not no. I would say that if you have an athlete like Saquon Barkley and you can get him on a safety for the majority of the game, you want that matchup 110%. So whether it comes in the run or whether it comes in 15 targets, yeah, I think that's something where, but that's effectively what they do with the quote unquote check down game is basically give him the ball in a clear out concept with everyone else going down the field. I think the balance is varying those looks more so, to your point, to varying those looks more so to basically give him more time and space other than just a check down.
And here's what I'll say to that, Nick. I totally understand your point. Obviously, this running game is not working right now. The blocking is terrible up front. They're not getting it done. And he's not running well behind the blocking as well at times too, which we've gone over. But at the same time, you have a new blocking scheme. You have a running back who comes to the NFL from a very different blocking scheme, running behind a very different offensive scheme in general at Penn State. And is it a scenario where maybe if you give him more opportunities to run the football, the plays will work better just based on the simple logic of you're practicing them more, you're executing them more, you're going to get better at them. And while at the same time, you're giving the offensive lineman more opportunities to step forward, to run block instead of dropping back in a pass protection. And while at the same time you're doing that, maybe, just maybe, you're pulling the defense, you're forcing the defense to kind of start to defend Barkley the way they defend Odell Beckham Jr. Instead of, dropping into zone and collapsing and rallying to the football when they try to clear out and dump down to him in the check down game, or various things like that, the way they're trying to defend Barkley now. Would it definitely, because to me it seems like a scenario where if they had committed to Barkley and they'd given this run game more opportunities, and if they started to do it moving forward, and in the passing game as well with the arrow routes like we talked about, and wheel routes and isolation routes. But if they do that, will the defense start to play the Giants differently, and how will that not open things up, in my opinion, is my question for you. And then at the same time, how will it not make it easier, not just Eli Manning, for any quarterback back there when the Giants are, committing so much to one player that the defense can't just pin their ears back and guess pass, and they can't just play these cloud coverages over Odell Beckham Jr. and those type of things.
The only reason why I think it wouldn't change is because if you have a running back threat, one of the best ways to combat that is zone coverage, because everyone's looking in the backfield. If you go to man, that's where it gets more dangerous, because you basically are relying on the front seven. And that front seven becomes front six if you're running 11 personnel. So the whole goal is spread. And so the only thing I would say that's a little off about that is that Barkley's best runs, or very frequently used run, was inside zone at Penn State. You're seeing the same thing here. I think that until the quality of execution, and not even just outside the offensive line, in these runs that I'm talking about with inside zone and duo, the tight ends are almost like the most important piece of this, whether it's the backside of inside zone, which is the weak side, or the front side of duo. And those blocks are not there. And it's not just Evan Ingram. It's across the board. That's the thing. Like, people think Ellison's a great guy, I'm sure, but the clip that I have in my piece of Julius Peppers and the club move that he throws on Ellison, he almost throws him to the ground. There's some holes here, and it means that everyone has to get better, whether it's this personnel or new personnel. So I don't know if it's going to be, I don't think it would really change that much what you would, specifically for other wide receivers. I think what you would get is in different personnel packages, you would get more of a bona fide threat from 12 personnel and that type of thing. But I think the varied looks are more important. And one stat that I'm leaving out of this, or one point that I'm leaving out of this, is the Giants have yet to run outside zone with pin pull scheme on the edge, which is nuts, because they ran that a lot. And Sherman ran that a lot with Minnesota. There has to be some reason for that.
Reason is for that.
I don't know. And so Tony Sparano was the offensive line coach in Minnesota, and the more and more Pat Shurmur's time kind of gets evaluated there, obviously a lot of credit goes to him. I don't know why they can't run this here, other than poor tight end blocking, or they're not confident. I don't know what they're not confident in.
They've had injuries at tight end with both Ingram and Ellison.
Correct, but you could use split ends too. You could use wide receivers. You could use 11 personnel and do bunch formations, like the way the Rams do it. There's certain things where they were running outside zone in the boundary earlier in the year, and then it just kind of stopped. And now it's been one thing, and it's above my head, to be honest. And I think we have incomplete information as to why there's not more variant. But until that happens, what I was thinking was, like, one of the best ways out for this rushing attack would be like a zone read kicker attached to these runs. Like, that would make the defense defend something else and change the look. Because if you're not going to change the look right now, you have to do something else or execute better. It's that simple.
Interesting. Well, if you're going to have that, you probably can't do it with Eli Manning. I assume, is that where you're getting at?
Yeah, and that's where I don't want to say that, but yeah, I'm just trying to think of how else, if you're going to stick with running in between the tackles as you are, and you don't have a new personnel, okay, well, how can you make the window dressing more? Maybe more jet motion outside of that. That's another option, which they use, right, but everyone else uses it like all the time. More misdirection maybe, but again, we're not privy in the room as to why they're not doing that now currently.
Right. And you know what? Fans might get a chance to see Kyle Lauletta sooner than they expect. I mean, if this team falls to the Falcons this week, I would even be at that point ready to do it. But, if they lose to the Redskins and the Falcons, there's no reason at 1-7 why this team shouldn't give Lauletta the second half of the season. I mean, I get it. Last year was tough for Giants fans who have been attached to Eli Manning, and I totally understand it. The way they went about it was wrong. It was a very stupid, terrible execution. There are so many ways in New York that you can control the message via the media. And, Ben McAdoo decided to, right before practice, tell Manning his ridiculous plan to play Eli for the first half of the games and then turn to Geno Smith. Clearly, Manning didn't take it well, and the news broke on Twitter, and it went from there. But the fact of the matter is, even a lot of majority of those Giants fans will tell you, they didn't really hate the idea of looking to a rookie quarterback like Davis Webb at the time last season. They hated the execution of the plan. So I think if they go about this in the right way, they can get Kyle Lauletta in there. And we'll move forward and talk about that more as it happens, Nick. But I want to talk about one more thing before we shift over to the defense side of the ball. I want to know if you're still in the defense circle of Patrick, Giants starting right guard, who I think, from another review of the All-22, every time I watch the tape, except for one game, I see this guy missing blocks all the time, all over the place. I do not think he's a good player in the NFL. I don't think he's a good fit in the scheme. They're going to have to take some dead cap if they want to immediately cut him next offseason, which would suck. But I'm starting to lean toward that's the ultimate goal that's the ultimate scenario I can see playing out. Talk me off the ledge with Omame.
I think he's as advertised, but the weaknesses have not improved. That, when I defended him, we highlighted, it's like, hey, like his contact balance is pretty bad. And hey, like, when he gets off balance, it goes really south quickly. I think where the expectation comes in, where it's off, is because of his salary number, and that's outside of his football. So I think that's where, if you're saying, is he playing up to the salary number? I absolutely get that, and I totally get if they want to, basically improve in the situation. But like when you look at his snaps against Cox, and like Cox smoked him on a few of them. And it's not an apologist, but like that's going to happen. So he's not, if they thought for paying, it was $15 million over 3 years.
Yes.
If they thought that they were getting the guy that was going to stop Cox, I think every bit of tape would have told you that's not the case. So that's where it's like, if you need to upgrade because you want that guard to reach block, like they're often asking him to do in zone runs, then I don't think he's the right profile player either.
Right.
So that's true.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Nick. He's just not a good fit for what they're asking him to do, which makes no sense as to why they signed him. When I was there at camp this year, he was the most imposing lineman on the entire team except for Flowers. Like, he's a big dude. He looks like he could fit maybe another scheme, but maybe not this one. And if that's the case, what was the reason for bringing him in? Did Gettleman think he saw something on the limited game tape that he watched that said, oh, wait, maybe we found a real gem and all we have to do is pay $15 million over 3? Or because that's the only thing that's starting to make any sense to me with Omame the more I watch him.
I think they're still finding. I guess when I'm critiquing the running game, I should even back up more. I still think that they're finding their identity, and to the point of, do they want to be a zone team or a gap team or both and multiple? And when they go to zone, they got guys that have some gaping holes. And and you refer to you allude to the get off the bus factor. His get off the bus factor is awesome. But if you're not running power all the time, and again, he's good in combo blocks but inconsistent. So if you're asking him though to do more than that in a lot of other capacities, I don't know. And then it gets into, like you see John Greco when he runs downfield, that guy is an angry man. Like putting guys on their back. He has play strength issues though. So like all these guys have this push pull of positive traits and negative traits. And so I think it's a matter of aligning all that. And maybe that doesn't mean he stays here ultimately. I think there is a spot for him in this league. For sure. But if you're going to continue to be a multiple run game with a big tilt to zone running, it's a tough spot for him.
For sure. And we'll move on to the defense on that note. But just one more thing. I just find it so unbelievably amazing how hard it is in the NFL to fix your offensive line. The Giants poured so many resources into the line this offseason. They signed a guard for $15 million over 3 years. They made a tackle, the highest paid left tackle in the NFL, offensive tackle in the NFL. And then they took another guard and third offensive lineman with the number 34 over pick, and yet the offensive line still sucks right now. It can't block in the run game at all. It's barely wins in the passing game. Sometimes it's okay. And looking forward, there's really only one player on this line that fans, or I would say just ourselves, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'll tell you there's one player on this line that I'm confident is going to be a member of this team 5 years from now, and that's Will Hernandez. Are you confident that any of these other players are going to be a member of this roster?
That's kind of the point, and it's a problem that money doesn't answer.
Yes, money cannot fix the offensive line in the NFL. The offensive line, it's a supply and demand issue, right?
I think so, but I would also go back though. I would take a step back for a quick second, just say that you have to commit to drafting and free agent signing and always getting better. And the bottom line is that the camp competition was not there, right? And that I know that doesn't happen right away. Right. But what you need to see is next camp a lot better. And then it gets better and better. And the other thing is not to stay on the Eagles, but to look at that offensive line. That was an offensive line that won a Super Bowl, seemed to be one of the best ones in the league, that now has a lot of question marks too. Yeah. And so it swings very harshly in the NFL. But the overall talent needs to be upticked from everybody. And like I said, I think it really means like, yeah, Solder, if he plays out his contract, I think he's going to end up on the right side. I think you're overall going to see big constant upgrades going forward.
Yeah, and you know what? You're right about that because you look at it, and Gettleman has, over the course of his career as a general manager of the Panthers, has done what Jerry Reese never did. Okay, so Giants past general manager Jerry Reese. We wonder why the offensive line is so bad right now. And you said it best. There's just not enough competition. There's just not enough of a constant flow via the draft, mostly because free agency is just nothing. There's just very rarely good free agent offensive linemen. But via the draft, there wasn't enough of a flow. I mean, Jerry Reese had 11 drafts with the Giants and spent a rounds 1 through 4 pick. We're ruling out rounds 5 through 7 because who cares about those rounds, honestly? They don't really produce starters most of the time. But in rounds 1 through 4, he drafted an offensive lineman 7 times in 11 drafts. That's just not a recipe for success at the NFL level. It's just not. And obviously, Gettleman's going to try to fix that moving forward. But it just amazes me that I'm looking at this line. They poured all those offseason resources into it. And there's only one guy I'm confident in. But we'll move on to the defense. Another talking point of Giants Twitter that I didn't notice on All 22, and we'll see if you saw it, Nick, is that the defense quit in this game. That's what I keep seeing. The defense quit against the Eagles. I didn't see it. Did you see it, Nick?
No, that first third quarter drive, I know people are frustrated, so I'm not trying to go, oh, it's so simple. Of course they didn't, but they're on the running plays in that drive. If people are wondering, I believe Snacks Harrison was off the field for a few of those, and that just kind of gets into this is what the defense will look like without that guy on the field, which is a little scary. And as well, there was a third down play there to me that really spoke in terms of guys hats getting to helmets, and you didn't see people staring at plays from afar. You had guys making mistakes, but then coming back the next play. I wouldn't question anyone there, and even if people want to question like Janoris Jenkins on the actual touchdown for that third down drive, like he's looking at the play a little bit, it's his man, but it may have looked that way, and I think it's influenced by. And I'll say it. I would say it to his face. I think it's influenced by Troy Aikman really kind of grinding an axe at that point of the game,
right,
towards the overall effort. And I think that jades people's interpretation of the broadcast game because it's going on, right? And you have all this emotion, and it sucks that it happens on a Thursday night game. But it wasn't there on the All 22, and I really think they were just beat, and that's okay. That happens.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly how I saw it too. I mean, basically, I wrote the biggest difference in this game to me was Carson Wentz. The guy makes plays off script. His first touchdown in the red zone was unbelievable, right? I mean, watching that on All 22 was insane. The anticipation of the throw, the breaking free of the pocket after off script. I mean, it was just all around an incredible play. That I think they just got beat in this game, like you just said, Nick. But I did notice one noticeable difference that I wanted to talk about. And that was the impact of the return of Olivier Vernon, who I don't think is fully healthy, but I think he's closer than he was last season when he returned from his high ankle sprain, a lot closer. Jason Peters is playing hurt for the Eagles left tackle. It's pretty clear. It's pretty obvious now. I mean, even before he suffered a torn biceps against the Giants, and he's going to continue playing through, which is nuts. But even before that game, I think he was hurt, honestly. He was on their injury report every week. He played, but he didn't, he doesn't look the same as he normally does. Or maybe he's just getting a step older, a step slower in his age. But Vernon really manhandled him, I thought. He had 6 combined quarterback hurries, pressures and hurries, hits, and sacks. He had a sack. Could have had more. Do you think that the addition of Vernon moving forward is really going to change? I mean, there's two ways to look at this, right, Nick? So one, I was so excited to watch this happening with Vernon. But two, it reminded me of how bad this Giants pass rush has been without him. I mean, you look around the NFL, that was the first game where the Giants were consistently getting pressure and it was affecting plays. So I don't know. I guess I'll ask you two things. One, did you see the same kind of impact as I did from Vernon? And then two, is a pass rush as much of a need as I'm making it out to be moving forward when you're reshaping this franchise in this offseason?
Yeah, answering going back, we're definitely on the second part of that, and getting it consistently is what the defense is still, or where the defense is still finding their identity. And I mean, coordinator and team. Betcher has a lot of arrows in his quiver. He's got a lot of tools in the toolbox. They run everything. And it's fun to watch. It's fun to break down on the All 22, or at least fun for me. I'm a massive nerd. But I think in doing that effectively week in and week out, that's where that's going to take a little bit of time. And so but I absolutely think 100% that's important for them going forward. And then definitely saw the impact from Vernon, even so much so where like I think when you just get better competitors around, it makes your other competitors play well too. Meaning like guys like Martin getting downfield and doing well against the injured right tackle Lane Johnson there too. So like you saw that you saw a bit of a surge. The only thing I would note is the play action stymied them a little bit, like play action normally does. And so that's where I think the pass rush went away. So when people think like, oh, maybe, I didn't see them again, getting back to the quitting part. I didn't see them quit at all. I didn't see them stop rushing. I didn't see them become less effective. I saw the Eagles win a little bit in terms of what they were doing in terms of slowing that down naturally through play action. So, but besides that, I think it's going to be a big deal. And I think I don't mean to sound harsh, but I do think it's a big deal for Vernon to get production if the Giants choose to be a seller of assets at the end of the season. And again, I think he's done nothing but play very hard when he's had the chance in terms of Vernon. But it's one of those things where they need him to play well for a lot of reasons this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, just kind of taking a 30,000-foot view moving forward with Vernon, I'm on the camp of keeping him. I think he's been very unlucky with the injuries. And I think that finding pass rushers like him in the NFL is a lot harder than people realize.
Yeah.
The Giants paid him so much money. And then when you just look at it from a cap standpoint, it's going to be a lot easier for the Giants to move on from him after the 2019 season rather than this 2018 season. Based on a cap standpoint, there will be a lot less dead money tied to it, tied to the decision to move on from him. So I think it's highly unlikely they're going to cut him. That's just my personal opinion on the situation. Now, can they be persuaded by a trade? Sure. I mean, they traded Jason Pierre-Paul for a third-round pick, and I love that deal. I don't know if I definitely do that with Vernon. I probably still would, though, just because I'm just such a big believer in getting those rookie contracts and just the value. I mean, B.J. Hill at $800K against the cap for the next 3 years after this one is going to be a freaking bargain and one of the people you build your team around. But, we'll revisit that as it gets closer. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about on the defense before we go into a Falcons preview?
No, I think, like you said, it was just one of those scenarios where they got I mean, the one stat I just think people have to realize is there was one drive from the Eagles' own territory that resulted in a score in the first half.
Right.
Every other drive, and I'm not trying. It's not giving them an excuse, but it's just like, dude, you're not going to stop a lot of guys when you set yourself up like that. It's very tough.
Yep, it's true. All right, let's go into the Atlanta Falcons preview. There still are Giants games to play, even at 1-5. And this is a winnable game, in my opinion, by the way, but we'll get into that later. But start with an injury rundown. This is going to be the first time all season where the Giants are the lesser of the two injured teams going into the game. That could be said about any week the Giants play the Falcons this year. The Falcons have been snake bitten by injuries to an incredible extent. I was actually watching the Monday Night Football game, the Packers versus the 49ers, and whoever was announcing, I guess one of the two wasn't winning, was talking about how the 49ers are the most injured team in the NFL, which is just total crap. Yeah, they lost Garoppolo, but no one's dealing with injuries worse than this Falcons team. Anyway, on the Giants front, so the Falcons will be without Devontae Freeman, their star running back. He's out for the year, or he's on IR. He might come back. They're going to be without their kicker, Matt Bryant, the former Giant. Obviously, they had all those injuries in the secondaries. Those players aren't coming back. And they might be without Calvin Ridley, their star rookie receiver. So they're definitely banged up heading into this one. On the Giants side of the ball, everyone practiced today on Thursday. Some were limited. Vernon was limited. He has a new ribs injury, but he said he's going to play. Ellison and Ingram, full participants. So the Giants, are getting really close to full health. And that's why I've been telling people on Twitter, stop talking like it's a shoo and the Giants are going to have the opportunity to draft Justin Herbert, even if they do decide Justin Herbert is the guy, the Oregon quarterback, because this Giants team is going to win some games down the stretch. I'm pretty sure of it, actually. They're not very injured, and football's a week-to-week game, and they competed in every game but this one. It's not like last year's team that was blown out in multiple games, in my opinion. So we'll talk about that later, obviously, as we move forward. But as far as that goes on the injury front, like I said, they're going to be as healthy as they've ever been. So, Nick, what can you tell me about the Falcons' offense? And is it going to give the Giants' defense trouble like the Eagles did? Is it going to be a game where simply, they're just going to get beat on the defensive side of the ball? Or can they have an answer for this Falcons' offense? Nick, you there?
Sorry about that. I had the mute on. Apologies. That was my first time First time I've done that this year.
Yeah, it's actually our first mess up, so hopefully.
Very cool. No, so the offense basically on the I think as fans we kind of remember the Falcons offense as one that the outside zone rushing into play action, basically the Kyle Shanahan version that Steve Sarkisian took over, basically bumbled through last year. It's a little bit different than that this year. Their rushing attack, the offensive line is not really in the best state across the board, not just from injury backups type standpoint. Starters are not playing as well. So a little bit of issues there. The running game is not as feared as I would say as previous games. So I think the Giants actually match up well there. One guy to keep an eye on, running back Ito Smith, 5'9", 195 pounds, kind of a shifty change of pace back for them. Rookie out of Southern Miss. This guy is the type of guy who can win a fight in a fist fight in a phone booth, but he could also kind of wiggle out, and all of a sudden you wouldn't know where he was. He's very, very slippery, but he doesn't have the perimeter speed. So the perimeter speed when they run outside zone comes from well-known Tevin Coleman, one of the best guys in the game for doing that. So that kind of gets into the rushing side of the house, and I think that the Giants are okay overall here because the schemes that they run are stuff that they're going to really see most of the year. A lot of fullback lead type runs, is a fair amount of misdirection. Where the wild card comes in is Matt Ryan. And I studied 3 games for them this year, kind of in depth. In one game, he basically couldn't hit the backside of a house. The other game, the most recent game against Tampa Bay, he was very, very sharp. So when he's the type of player, I think guys know that when he has time, he can do what he does. But I think his timing even looks better this year when he's right, but when he's wrong, it was very, very wrong. And so on the passing side of the house, I think that they run a little bit. They definitely run a varied scheme comparatively to what they were running in the last 2 years. I see different types of route combinations. So I definitely think Sarkisian is coaching for his job and doing a pretty good job of it despite their record. Despite the fact that they haven't really won a lot of games, and they've looked good, okay in the Tampa Bay game. But besides that, it's been kind of tough. And I just think that in general, you're going to have a team that needs wins too because guys are competing for their jobs.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it, there are weaknesses on this Falcons offense. I mean, as you mentioned, and looking at it, the guard play of Fusco, and I believe the other guy's name is what was it again? Schweitzer?
Schweitzer, yeah, he's a tackle moved into the guard position. Yes.
So their 2 guards are playing bad football. I mean, if there's ever a game the Giants would get interior defensive pressure in the pass rush game, it has to be this one. Now, that doesn't mean they'll do it. I'd love to see Vernon get some snaps at the 3-tech in some third and long passing down situations. We'll see if it happens, but obviously they haven't been able to get much of a push from their other guys, playing on the interior. But if there's a game to do it, there is. This is the one. I mean, they have that as a definite weakness. I agree with you. The loss of Freeman, just meaning more snaps for Ito Smith, is not necessarily a weakness. This Ito Smith kid is legit. Hopefully you guys can scoop him up on your fantasy football waiver wires. If he hasn't already been scooped, he probably has. But yeah, so I think this they can attack this offense with their pass rush and with their defensive front overall. But I don't think it's going to be an easy task for them by any means, especially at home in the Dome. But on the flip side of things, is this a game where the Giants offense can finally open this up like they did a little bit against Carolina when they scored 31 and score some points?
Yeah, I think that they're a banged up cover 3 structure that plays the pretty simplistic. A lot of although they play a fair amount of man, mostly landmark zone cover 3. And so I know I sound like a broken record, but I continue to think that this is on the Giants unit, not anything necessarily that the wrinkles that they're going to face that are going to stymie them. And so in terms of our profile, yeah, Dan makes a good point. Is it similar to Carolina? Sure. I think Carolina plays a little bit more too high. And I'm imagining this because I haven't studied the defense that closely this year, to be fair. But I would they're definitely they're closer to Jacksonville in terms of the amount and the type of offenses of coverage you will see. And with the injuries that they have to the linebacker position and to the safety position, those are key spots in this defense. And I almost feel bad for them in this environment because without those two spots, they're big holes. So yeah, I definitely think they can. And I think too, from a protection standpoint, maybe this is the week where you see it's just a little easier for the offensive line in general.
Yeah, and I agree with that actually, especially if you're profiling the way you said, because the Giants offense actually found a decent amount of success, in my opinion. I know stats didn't totally read it against the Jaguars defense in week 1. Moving on, we'll move on now to some questions from the fans. So if you guys are out there and listening every week, do us a favor, throw us more questions our way, because we love this part of the show the best, answering your questions. Didn't get as many this week, but keep them coming. I know it's a downtime for the Giants right now at 1-5 in their regular season, but there will be talking points. There will be things to talk about. It's going to be a busy offseason again. But we'll start with Anthony Parisi, who asks, what do you think of Schumer's offensive scheme, and what do you think the offensive coordinator, Mike Shula, brings to the table?
So as I've seen and read, and kind of it checks out in the tape, I would definitely say that Shermer's offensive scheme is as advertised. Simple complexity with, I would say basic, but just simple half field reads for the quarterback in the drop back game to basically pick a side and go for what he wants to do. I would say, maybe not as many screens as I thought. And I think that may have to do with Eli Manning's footwork and not necessarily being able to deliver a screen in the best way. So maybe that's the one thing that I will say I did think they would throw more screens this year. And what does Shula bring to the table? And not to answer the question that quickly, but just to kind of get to the second part of the question to help answer the whole overall question. If Shurmur does the play calling, or not if he does the play calling, Shula does a lot of the other play design. And so where you see that poke its head up, and I know people don't really like this, but when you see the two wide receiver offset stack looks on the wide side of the field, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an RPO, but that look is very Shula. And they run in Carolina, they ran a lot of smoke routes, a lot of different types of screens. That type of influence is definitely Shula. I would say the jailbreak screen, which every team is running like out the ass this year, that's definitely a Shula thing. What I'm still kind of waiting to get kind of confirmation on is usually a coaching staff, and especially one coming from the Andy Reid kind of tree, would break the play calling duties or the play design up between multiple offensive coaches. So there'll be one guy responsible for the third down game. There's a run game coordinator. There's a red zone game coordinator usually. And so still wondering who's doing those specific roles. I could guess between what I think. I think Shermer's the down, and I think Shula is the red zone. But that's kind of how they divvy it up. And it's origination from Shula and then kind of choice and execution from Shermer.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's basically what I've seen as well. I mean, that's what I've read as well, Nick. So that's kind of what. And as far as what I think of this scheme, I'm a little harsher on it than Nick is. I get what he's saying. It's as advertised, but personally, the way it was advertised to me is that Shermer's offense was ever changing, and it was designed to be less rigid and fit, and focus on the player's skill sets more instead of using things that we've seen in the past from Shermer. And I just personally, like I said earlier on the podcast, I don't think this is the best style of offense for the Giants. I think this offense should run through Saquon Barkley and take more shots, and basically let everything come to them from that style of offense. But, when the run blocking is this bad, it's hard for me to make that argument, so I totally get it. Moving on, though, Benji asks, I think Saquon Barkley is the future leader of this team, to face the franchise after Eli Manning. What do you guys think?
I mean, no question. Absolutely no question. Says all the right things.
You'll get hit hard if you say absolutely no question like that, Nick, on Twitter. Something I said, and apparently it's a controversial topic. Like, it amazes me the defense that Odell Beckham Jr. gets, and I love Odell Beckham as a player too. But when Saquon Barkley is a rookie, has to calm down Beckham on the sideline. I mean, that's one thing. But another thing is just you listen to Barkley, and it's always we. It's always team. With Beckham, there seems to be some team in there for sure. I mean, if they were winning, things would be better. But there's also I don't know if my quarterback play is good. I see other receivers getting 20 targets a game, which is not true, by the way. I know if I'm being schemed open. I think they're scheming me out of games, and we're not figuring out a way to stop that, which I actually think is true. I think he has got a good point there. I know me and you disagree a little bit on that with Shermer, but the point is there's a lot of me there versus a lot of we with Barkley. So yeah, I want to hear what you say about this, Nick, but for me, it's no question as well.
Yeah, I definitely think it's, you want to build a team around a guy. I get there's the whole issue with the length, the length of career for running back. This has nothing to do with me giving validity to this, to taking number 2 overall. It doesn't matter. He's here. He's the guy you want. Absolutely. And, ultimately, I really think it's just kind of the tip here, because you're going to get different types of weapons. You're going to get a better offensive line. And also you're going to have a different team probably in 18 months, right? Like a really different team. And you're going to have this guy being kind of the face, like, okay, fine, let's go win. Like that. I'll take that all day.
Yep. All right. David Pickney asked, this is a good one. You're going to like this one, Nick. He says, Loletta, period. Will he be successful? Won't he be successful? Tell us why.
Ooh, interesting way to put it there. I like that the structure of that question. He will be successful because of his attention to detail and technician as both a pocket and non-pocket passer, so a passer in general, I guess you could say, where he'll be put in situations, I'll throw a caveat on top of that, where he's put in situations that cater to his strengths of being able to throw on in anticipation and throw in and execute a rhythm kind of passing attack. He won't be successful if I'll say this, if the pressure is such where he has to complete multiple balls down the field over 15 yards. And I don't necessarily just mean like a Coryell type structure or system where that's done more often. It's just as well too within a game. If he's part of a team that is constantly trailing, I think he doesn't necessarily have that type of game. But the other side of it too, with his mobility, I think is kind of interesting because he's an athlete. So, and he's comes from multiple different schematic backgrounds. He had 4 different offensive coordinators in 5 years at Richmond. That helps him too. And just one last thing, second part, why he won't be successful is just in general the ability for the play speed to reach a high level at the NFL, and that has to be the biggest difference between the FCS and the NFL. And so far, he's checked those boxes, but the very, very, very limited sample size.
Yeah, I'll jump in there too on this one, Nick. I wouldn't put as much stock as some Giants fans seem to be putting in his preseason performance. I know he didn't get the deep balls there in that 4th game, but that was one game, guys. I don't want to hang his career in the balance on one preseason game. Will he be successful? For me, it's because he moves through his reads really quick. He gets the ball out of his hands really quick. He processes things really quick. So that, to me, is a really important trait for a quarterback. Now, what I've worried about with Loletta is what I'll always worry about with Loletta. Can he throw through the wind and the weather conditions in December in MetLife Stadium, in January in MetLife Stadium, if the Giants are lucky enough to make it that far? I don't know if he has that kind of arm talent or arm strength, I guess it would be. I don't know how important that is to Shermer's system because, look, Shermer almost made a Super Bowl with Case Keenum in that offensive system, who to me, who Loletta draws some comparisons to, and I could see it. I could totally see it with Loletta's impressive athleticism. He really is an impressive athlete. He can be used in a lot of ways that Keenum was used in, and I think he can complete balls down the field. I just think it's what you said, Nick. It's more so when the defenses aren't expecting it and a little bit off script, right? Or at least that's how I see it. So to me, I see him as a fit for not only Shermer's scheme, but I think he can be a successful quarterback. I am in no way writing him off like I wrote off Davis Webb. Like I pretty much wrote off Davis Webb. I mean, dating back to the day they drafted Webb and then the ensuing time until every day after that, I wrote him off. I didn't like Webb on game tape at Cal versus where I did like Loletta. Obviously, like Nick said, it was against D2 competition. But that's kind of where I'm at with this Nick. I think he can kind of serve in that Keenum role. And as we've seen now this season, I mean, Case Keenum has been terrible with the Denver Broncos outside of Pat Shermer's scheme. So, there are some quarterbacks who are good fits for what an offensive play caller and what an offensive designer wants to do. And I think Loletta could certainly be that.
And the one other thing too, just to add a quick point to yours, because you hit on it in the 4th game of the preseason. It's funny looking back on it for what we know now. We know now that, or we were told that they were basically going to cut Webb, right? Because they cut Webb 48 hours later. And I think watching that tape back again, I think Shermer was kind of, I don't want to say screwing with Loletta, but the play calling situationally, Loletta made mistakes and Shermer came right back to deep balls. And I swear to God, if I could ask this question to him, I would. I don't think he would ever, kind of get him in a room with truth serum. Maybe he'll give the answer. But I think that Shermer was basically testing his quarterback to see what happens when things go really bad and to see what his floor was like at that point in time.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, here's the thing: the Giants are going to be in the market almost no matter what for a quarterback in this 2019 NFL draft. Even if they don't end up with the top pick to get a Justin Herbert type, if he ends up being the guy, or that we, or that I, that everyone, or that anyone, the Giants, I should say, has evaluated as the number one. And even if they do end up with maybe having one quarterback they think is worth taking that high, or two or three, depending on what they decide after looking at this class. And I'm just going to give you guys an early sign for me. I don't really like anyone yet but Herbert. I mean, I'm going to keep looking. I don't like Daniel Jones. I'll tell you that. And he's starting to move up as maybe the number two. And obviously I haven't been through my whole process, but it is what it is. But anyway, no matter what, they're going to have to consider it. So it really doesn't make sense for this team once they fall out of the playoff contention to not put in Walletta. You got to see what he's capable of. You have to see if he provides you with the luxury of waiting until the 2020 draft, or if you got to get moving on this quarterback situation, you got to get someone. So we'll see with that moving forward. I know we diverged a little bit from the question, so we'll jump back into the questions here. Matt asks, what do you make of the Derek Carr to the Giants rumors?
No, I can't speak to if they're actually the validity.
No, don't answer the validity. Just
yeah. No, I was getting back to the
Giants should trade for Derek Carr. I'll ask the question differently.
Yeah, and what I would say very simply is, if for some reason Derek Carr was Pat Shermer's guy or Mike Shula's guy, and they've thought about this and they game planned this, there's all this information that we don't have. Like behind the room, they're thinking, "Hey, we're waiting for Gruden to totally tank the Raiders, like many people thought he would, and then we'll buy him." Then I get it. But based upon the information we have now, I do not think the Giants should be buyers of assets on any level. It just doesn't make sense. There's too many holes. You need picks. You need money. You need all these things. You should be seller of assets. And I don't even just mean that just because of the record. Like in general, how else are you going to fix the team? You could maybe buy more wins. And by the way, we figured out in the offensive line that's not how it works. So why try to do it here? Unless if he was somehow insanely the guy that you wanted.
Yes, the way I see it's a little different, Nick. So I don't know if I clarified this. The rumor or the report was started from Jason Lockenfora, the CBS Sports NFL insider, who said, he didn't report it as he's hearing this. He said it makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to make a bold prediction that the Giants will trade for Derek Carr at the Combine this February.
Got it. Okay.
Now, of course, no, you can't. In the NFL, it's against the rules to trade at the Combine. At that point, the league year hasn't started yet. So that is one flaw in this. But I'm going to say this, Nick. I actually disagree with you. I think if they did have a chance at somebody who they totally believe could be the guy at quarterback, you get him no matter what. That's just how I've always viewed football. I always believe that the quarterback is the most important position by light years to me. It's not even really close. And I've seen quarterbacks do a lot with a little, a lot of times. Right now, I'm seeing it with Aaron Rodgers somehow getting that Packers team 3-2, which I 3-2-1. I just don't even understand how it's possible. But to me, my issue with this is that Derek Carr is not the guy. Okay, he's not the guy. He has the highest yards per attempt average of his career is 7.0. He's done it twice in his 2 good years. He is one of the lowest yards per attempt average of all starters in the NFL over the past 5 years, since whenever he entered the NFL. And I'm a big believer that yards of attempt is a really important metric when you evaluate quarterbacks. You can debate that with me another time, Nick. You don't agree with that, but I think it's a great sign of somebody who's either playing the position well or not. I've actually heard Mike Lombardi talk about how that's something that he used to evaluate, and that when he was in the Patriots front office, something that they focused on. But in addition to that, he's never really been good except for the 2015 and 2016 seasons when, go figure, Poor Football Focus gave the Raiders offensive line elite grades. I'm not saying they were the 10th or 15th in that range of offensive line. They were the second or third best offensive line in each of those seasons. And that's the only time he was ever successful. Guess what he's not going to get with the Giants? A top 3 offensive line next year, the year after. We just went over the offensive line in depth in this episode. That's not happening. And in addition to all that, he would come to the Giants with a $22.3 million cap hit, and that's only going to grow over time. We have that right now with Eli Manning. We have a middling quarterback who's getting paid a lot of money. Why in the hell would the Giants want? I get it. He's younger. The younger doesn't mean better. It really doesn't in this case. I've watched Derek Carr enough. So for me, I'm a hard no on Derek Carr. I would be devastated as somebody who covers this team. If I had to cover this decision, this franchise-altering move, which in my opinion would bury them in a deeper hole than they've ever been for the reasons that Nick talked about before, about giving up assets for somebody. So yeah, that's my piece on the Derek Carr thing. Do you have anything else you want to add there, Nick?
Negative. You nailed it. I like it.
All right, I'll take it. All right. Benji asks the second question from Benji, and I appreciate it. I love it. Like I said, guys, get your questions in. Tell us on Twitter. We want to do this questions. If you ask multiple questions, we'll answer them. That's what we're going to do right now. So get them in. Benji asks for the second question. Also, it's actually a two-part question, Nick. So we got more.
I like it.
Also, what is the solution to Eli's mental processing? I think he's just shell-shocked and not willing to take a hit just to complete a pass anymore. Is he? And then the second part of this question is he coming off his reads too quick? So you tackle this one first, Nick.
So, as I grumble, the first part of the question, I don't know. In terms of what's the solution? I don't think the game plan can become simpler, and I don't think the Giants can run fewer plays. I think the Giants are actually the part of the playbook where they need to run more plays at this stage in terms of if you're self-scouting after 4 to 5 to 6 weeks and what you put on tape. I think that's a question for Eli. It's like, in terms of his own head. Of course, he's not going to really kind of talk about that. I think it's a confidence issue. I think it's in general just the ability to. I'll answer it this way, which is kind of gives another background. I think teams right now, I think the NFL is a very harsh league, and teams defense and teams in terms of scouting tendencies just exploit your weaknesses. And I think teams are doing everything they possibly can from the snap to after the snap to absolutely screw with Eli Manning, whether it's buzzing a safety down, whether it's, blitzing from spots. It's not even blitzing. It's more just changing the coverage and making it look different than it did before. And the Eagles really did that to a T. Is that something you can't get around? Absolutely not. But I don't know how to get it better. In terms of, is he coming off his reads too quick? I think it's a mixture of both. In some cases, he's sticking on his reads too long. I would, just sticking with the red zone because I just finished that piece. There are multiple times where he's holding on to that first read too long. Yep. And when he comes to that second read and it's on the same side of the field and it's the answer, he's not, his footwork doesn't drive him to then throw the ball where it's almost like he's almost not even thinking. He's almost automatically releasing as he comes into that next hitch. You're not seeing that. So I think it's an overall ability to execute, a timing and rhythm passing game that is just, falling short in multiple ways.
Completely agree with Nick on this one. I think that, and this to me is the biggest reason why the team has to move on from Eli Manning this offseason. A part of that reason is obviously the fact that, they can save $17.5 million in salary cap space by releasing him. But yeah, this is the biggest issue right now with Eli Manning, and I don't know what's happened and why this is happening. I think Nick brings up a really interesting point. I think it is a lot of confidence issue with Manning, and with all quarterbacks in the NFL who play confidently. And like Nick said, defense coordinators are scheming to really make things difficult for who Eli Manning is as a quarterback. But guess what? They do that against every quarterback they play, and it's up to the quarterback to get around that. And at this stage of Eli's career, the situation as it is with this Giants team, he's not getting around it. And like Nick said, there are times that I've seen as well in all 22 where he's not getting to be basically, like as Nick says, half field reads. He's sticking on the one half of the field when other things are opening up in the other half of the field with the other reads. And like Nick said, by the time he's getting around to those, his footwork's not there in the throw. And like Nick said, it's not quick enough for him. So there are tons of issues when it comes to that if you really broke it all down.
One last thing just to interject, because you triggered my memory for it. it hits on the second or the meat of this of the second part of the question. I don't think he's shell shocked. I don't think it's a. I don't think it's a. I don't think it's because he doesn't have the the stones to stay in the pocket. I don't think it's any of that. I think what I would cite is for fans this week to watch Matt Ryan in the pocket. Matt Ryan isn't any more of a man because he stands in the pocket, but his footwork allows him to stay on schedule where he has the confidence to hang in there because he knows that in a beat and a half the ball's out. I think Manning's footwork isn't there, and that makes him want to do other things for whatever reason. I don't think it's a willingness to stay in. I think it's a roadmap to get there.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And I haven't heard that before, so I like that one a lot, Nick. On that note, we're going to do predictions and then sign off for today's podcast. I'll start with the predictions. I think that this Giants team is just not a winning team. I'm just going to be honest. They don't do things that winning teams do. They make so many mistakes on special teams. They put themselves in horrible field position every game, as Nick talked about, or actually me and Nick talked about this off the podcast, like we're trying to figure out what went wrong with the defense. And honestly, the Eagles started incredible field position on offense the entire first half. What a recipe for disaster for an opposing for your own defense. So I think this team will lose this game. I actually do think they'll put up some points against the Falcons. If they don't put up points against the Falcons, then you might as well really just you need some changes on this offense, and it's probably the quarterback position with anybody, Tanny or Lillette, if they don't put up points on this defense. But I think they will. I think they're going to lose this game. The Giants 31-17. The Falcons will get the win. How about you, Nick?
I don't know if I'm just a blatant optimist, but it's hard for me to to say they're automatic. It's hard to me against the structure that Manning should succeed on, despite all that I've written. And I say all that I've written, but just like I feel like I've just beaten the dead horse in terms of who he is as a quarterback. I want to believe that he can, and I want to believe that he can win this game 27-17 because his job's really on the line at this point. And I'll stay the optimist, and maybe it's not the best way to think, but it is what it is. And I do think that against these structures, against this decimated secondary, I think you can call it that. I know he faced one last week, but I think that ultimately they can find a way in the spotlight to win here.
Yeah, and Atlanta's front is not going to be like the front Giants faced last week with the Eagles. Vic Beasley's not having a good season for them, and he's their top pass rusher. He also profiles a different kind of style of pass rusher anyway than what they've been struggling with the Giants. But on that note, we're going to sign it off. A little bit of, what's it called? House cleaning first. If you guys want to find more of our stuff, you can follow us both on Twitter. Nick, throw out your Twitter handle here and where we can find the rest of your work.
Team Manic 21 on Twitter. I've been doing not so much this week, but trying to get more involved on the Reddit side of things. So a lot of posts on Reddit. Most of my work is over at cover1.net. The other parts of my work are over at insidethepylon.com. Really that's it for me.
Yeah, and you guys can find me on Twitter at Dan Schneier NFL, DANSCHNEIER NFL. You can find all my work on the CBS Sports app. Just download the CBS Sports app, go to your favorite teams, put in the Giants, put on alerts, and you'll get only the good stuff. Otherwise, you can find any of it on 247sports.com/New York Giants. And as well to all of that, please do us the favor and subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy it. Tell your friends if they enjoy it to subscribe to it. The subscribes and the downloads are really what help us out the most. So thanks again for tuning in, guys. And on that note, we'll end it off with a classic. Go Giants.